Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, so now we can see.
Great. Okay. Okay. Just okay. Yeah. So we learned that making MVC applications, whether it is a web application or a microservice application. Okay. So here Spring Framework modules, right? For controller, we learned we use Spring MVC, um, for doing controller operations, and for security, Spring Security module, and for business layer, Spring Transactions, AOP, and for doing CRUD operations, we use Spring JDBC, Spring ORM, Spring Data, right? And to run all these classes, we understand that we need IOC containers. IOC containers are embedded containers or embedded classes that already given with Spring Core module, and all these module given in the form of jar file. So these are the framework modules, Spring Framework modules. They have given these modules in the form of jar file. Okay. So to run this Spring application, we need, when you make a MVC application, right? Particularly an example like online bookstore, if you implement by using Spring modules. Okay. So we need to finally convert it into a var, and you should deploy it into any web container like Tomcat, Undertow, or Jetty, any web container, right? So when you deploy this into web container, this Tomcat is not going to manage your controller classes or model classes. So who will manage your classes? Your classes will be managed by another container. We call it as IOC container. Okay. So our MVC classes or the complete controller and model classes are going to manage by IOC containers. Those containers given in the form of classes. Okay. So those containers given in the form of classes, and they came along with Spring Core bundle itself. Along with Spring Core jar file itself, we have all the IOC containers. Okay. So before learning these all modules, right? If we can start with Spring Core module and about Spring IOC containers, okay, comfortably we can learn other modules. Okay. So comfortably we can learn other modules. So here we started with Spring Core. Okay, we started with Spring Core. So for Spring Core, right, they given Spring Core jar file, Spring Core jar file, Spring provided Spring Core jar file. Using the Spring Core jar file, we can able to use IOC and dependency injection. These are the main features. These are the main features of Spring Core. Okay, along with this, right, it has containers also. About containers also we will learn here. The containers are like Tomcat, WebSphere. We have multiple containers, right, to run our classes. So this is already we discussed. Yeah. So yeah, we discuss about containers also. So the first thing, right? First thing, we are going to write our classes, whether it is a controller class or a business class or a DAO class or a utility class for our complete application, right? So to implement a complete application apart from your presentation pages, whether it's a controller, business, DAO or utility, we implement that class as a simple plain Java class. Okay, as a simple POSO class we create it. We call it as plain old Java object. Okay, POSO stands for plain old Java object. So this is how the plain Java class looks. Okay, a simple student class. It has private properties with public setter methods and its own business methods or getter methods. Okay, a plain Java class, and this class is not extending or not implementing from any other API. We just have a simple bean class, or you can call it as a POSO class. And how to run these classes, I implemented multiple POSO classes, right? For my controller, few POSO classes, and for business, few POSOs, and for DAO, few, and for utilities. Okay, I have implemented multiple POSO classes. Consider you have count like this: two controller classes, two business classes, and two DAO classes, and one utility class. Okay, so this many classes I have. So how to run all these classes? You have implemented for your application this many classes. It's a big count, isn't it? No, we will have many classes for any application, right? We write like tens of or hundreds of classes. So to run all these classes, right? Run all your POSOs, whatever it is. We use IOC containers. To run all these classes, we use IOC container. It doesn't require any special like Tomcat or WebLogic. Okay, so Tomcat is, I mean, it is capable to manage servlet classes. If you have any servlet class, go with Tomcat. If you don't have any servlet class, Tomcat is not required. For implementing MVC classes in Spring, okay, or to manage your complete controller layer to DAO layer, Tomcat is not required. You can run all your classes on Spring based IOC container only. Okay, a Tomcat or WebLogic really not required. Okay, you can run your classes on IOC. IOC is capable to manage all your classes. Again, right, as I said, IOC container is a simple Java class. Okay, it's a simple Java class given in your jar files itself. So in Spring Core jar file, we have a Bean Factory IOC container. In Spring Context jar file, we have application context class. Okay, so in this jar file we have this class, and in this jar file we have this class. So this is the advanced class that we use, right? This is the advanced class. Again, I'm saying these are the classes. By using these classes, right, we run all other classes. Okay, these classes are IOC container classes. Earlier, the containers we used to use are a separate softwares. We used to download them and we used to install in our servers, right? And we used to deploy our WAR files or EAR files into this particular special softwares. But here, those special softwares really not required to run your classes. To run your classes, you need these classes only again. So these classes came along with your jar files only, your framework jar files. Okay, if you call a framework given in the form of jar only. Okay, Spring framework given in the form of jar only. Using these jars, you could able to write all your classes. You could able to write all your classes, and you can run your classes also. Self containers, we can say Spring came up with self container. It has its own container. Okay, so we have POSO class, and to run POSO class, we have containers and how to handle it. So we need to configure our POSO class first into Spring XML file. We need to configure our controller POSO or business or DAO or utility POSOs, right? You should first configure into Spring XML file. Okay, you need to configure your class into Spring XML file. Finally, we load it into our IOC container. Finally, we load it into IOC container. Let me show you this once again diagrammatically. Then we can see an example. Okay. So basically, whatever poses you implement for your application, right? Controller poses and your business poser classes and your DO poser classes and connection pool classes. You can have your own kind of custom connection pool or existing connection pool classes, right? I have implemented my controller. Okay. So you have implemented a controller here. Consider student controller, and I have a student business class, student business, and student DAO, and some connection pool, Oracle DB connection pool for reserving number of connections to improve our application performance. I have some connection pool here. So all these classes have created again, right? These all classes are simple poser classes. Okay, simple poser classes. A plain Java classes would be enough for your controller handling and for your business handling or for your DB handling. Simple posers would be enough. All these posers once done with your implementation, right? So you have a use case like student registration. Here you have a student web page. Student web page you have, okay, and from that view you are submitting some data like student name, right? Student email, form you have, and from here you are submitting this data. From here you are submitting this data. When you submit this data, first data will be transferred to controller. Controller will read and it will validate. Then it will forward to business. Business will send this data to DAOs. DAOs finally will persist your data into databases. So if you have any database instance, it will connect with the database and it will insert your data. If you consider this is a simple use case, okay? Finally, DAO will insert data into your database. This is how we implement all our requirements. Okay. Now, as I said, we can implement all these classes using Spring only. Here, controller classes, business, DAO, and the connection pool, everything. Once you're done with your implementation, once you create your Pozo classes, right? I implemented my Pozos. The next thing what you should do, you configure all these Pozo classes in a XML file. In a XML file, you need to configure all these Pozo classes. You'll have a Spring XML file. Okay, in Spring XML file, we need to configure these Pozo classes. Spring XML file main root tag name is beans. The main root tag name is beans. Spring XML file main root tag name is beans. For servlet web.xml file, the main root tag something like web app, right? Here it is beans. So in between beans and beans, okay, beans means Java beans. Okay, yeah. So in between beans and beans, we need to configure all our,
So what is, excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir.
yeah.
So what is beans?
A bean is simple poser. A simple poser
Okay.
class, we can call it as bean. Okay, a simple Java
Okay.
class. Okay, yeah, simple Java class. That's why I'm saying you need to implement simple poser classes, plain Java classes. Okay, without having any, extending like servlet, HTTP servlet, generic servlet, or you may have experience with the threads and all, right? We implement some runnable thread. So we will not do such kind of implementation here for any use case, right? Either a controller class or a business or DAO class, we write a simple plain Java class without extending any class or without implementing any class. So all classes you can consider like POSO classes or bean classes. You need to configure your beans here in between beans and beans tag. So here in between beans and beans, the child tag name is bean tag. Okay. You can configure any number of beans. Bean, it has multiple attributes. Okay. Attributes. Here we have one is ID. Using ID we can configure bean ID. Okay. Bean ID. And we have class tag. We can configure bean class path here. So for every bean, you can have a ID and you can configure class also here. Bean ID and bean class. So as I have multiple bean classes, student controller, you need to configure your student controller ID here. So I'll give student controller. So controller ID, you can put any ID. Okay. And you need to configure here fully qualified path. The package name of your class dot the package name dot your class name student controller. If there is any package, in generally we put our classes in package, right? So we compulsory should use packages. Without packages also we can write, but that's not a good practice. So configure this way. Every POSO class you can configure as a bean. Every bean can have a ID and you can have a class configuration here. The same way you can configure all your bean classes. One is controller, one is business. Your business instance, you can configure here package name dot student business and your DAO student DAO and your connection pool. Whatever number of beans you have, right? All that beans you need to configure here. Connection pool. For Arkil, you use some kind of, there are many connection pool implementations, basic data source, existing POSO classes we have. We can use those classes also. Okay. Anyway, I have configured all my POSO classes into Spring XML file, right? So to create application, you need to use simple POSO classes for your implementations. Once done with your presentation, right? Presentation you may going to implement in HTML or any other front-end technology. Then coming to controller side, here we use a simple POSO class for my controller and simple POSO class for my business and a simple POSO class for my database operation and for connection pool also. All that POSOs you should configure here. You need not to follow any order, okay? You can configure connection pool first, then DAO, business controller, in any order you can configure, okay? So the order is really not matter here. You can configure your beans in any order. All your beans you need to configure into Spring XML file. First thing, we implement POSO classes, okay? So we write some POSO classes and we configure POSO classes into Spring XML file and how to run it. How to run your controller or business or DAO or whatever classes you implemented, hundreds or thousand classes for your implementation. All that classes we configure here and we run finally into again using a Java class. So I want to call another Java class. How we can call? Using a main method we can do that. Public class application, public class application. So this way we write, right? We will write a main method. We'll have a main method public static void main string arguments and here you can load your XML using which class? Your IOC container class. Here we need to use our IOC container either bean factory or application context. If it is a bean factory, this is how we will write bean factory. Factory is equal to new class path XML bean factory or XML bean factory we say. To load XML bean factory implementation we have. So here we load our XML file, Spring XML. We can load here. Okay. So when you load this, this is your IOC container. This is your IOC container. Here only you should load your XML. So first thing, we configure all bean classes into, we configure all our bean classes into Spring XML file using a bean tag. We do that using a bean tag. We do that. But to run all these classes, you need a server. You need a server. But as I said, you doesn't require any special server here. We have a server given in the form of Java class. We call it as IOC container. Okay, IOC server. You can use this IOC to run your classes. Just you need to load your XML into IOC. Then IOC will do what? Whenever you start this main method, this IOC will create instances. It will create in your JVM, right? It will create all the instances. Your controller class object it will create. Okay, controller object, your business object, and DAO object, connection pool object. Everything will be created by your IOC in your JVM heap area. In your machine, all these objects will be created. IOC will create all these objects. Your controller object, right? Your controller and your business object, your business object, and DAO object, connection pool object. All these objects will be created by your IOC container. This IOC will manage all your objects. This IOC will manage all your objects. Okay. So this is the first example I wanted to show you. Okay. So we will create multiple classes. We configure that class and we will see how Spring is creating objects for them. Okay. Let me create a example here. So this is how you need to create. Okay. Use Eclipse or STS ID. Okay. So first I'll start with Eclipse. Okay. Install Eclipse. The version which I'm using, I can show you here. Eclipse, about Eclipse IDE.
I think
So
help.
this is the, yeah. So this is the one that I'm using. Okay. 2019-06. You can download any latest version. Okay. You can use any latest one, or you can go with STS also. Both are same. STS is having some more features that we will discuss before Spring Boot. Okay. So go to File, New Project. Okay. Create a simple Java project. Simple Java project. Okay. For time being, we will use simple Java project. IOC test. I'll show you how IOC works. Okay. So here we need to implement all our POSO classes. Okay. We need to implement all our POSO classes in packages form.ds.web. I'll put my controller POSOs here, and similar way I'll create BO for business and DAO for database classes and you can have utility classes here. Okay, write simple poser classes. Write simple poser class like poser, student controller. I don't want to put any implementation here. Just I'll show you how objects are creating for time being. So let me put some statement in constructor. You know, right? While creation of object, whoever creates, whether it is your framework or student controller.
Naveen, your voice is breaking.
Okay, is it with everyone?
No,
Hello.
we are good.
No, sir,
Yes,
we are
Naveen.
not really. Your voice is not breaking.
Okay, I didn't get that. Is it with everyone or one or two?
No, sir, we are getting.
No, we are good actually.
Okay. Yeah. If it is with few, one or two, please check your internet connection. I hope. Yeah. So for many of them, it looks it's good. Okay. Just a minute. My keyboard stopped working since yesterday. Let me use this on-screen keyboard. Don't worry. By tomorrow's session, I'll repair it. Okay. So I'll put some statement here. Controller object. So I'll show you who is creating this object. Okay. As I said, your IOC will be going to create object. So controller and create your business object, student business. Student business object, student DAO. I'm adding some default constructors here just to show you how object is creating. Okay. And you can have any utility classes. Okay. Consider I have connection pool, util class I have a connection pool utility class, connection pool object. Okay, so I have multiple posers for my application. Time being consider this is fully implemented controller. Okay, so I have student controller and student business, student DAO, and one connection pool object. Now all these classes you are going to configure in a Spring XML file. Okay, so create one folder or a package for your XML. I'm creating a resource package. Here create a XML file. Okay, create XML file, choose file and create some spring.xml or student-app.xml, anything, right? You can name anything. You can name anything for your XML file, and you need to configure all your bean classes here. As I said, beans is the root tag. So beans is the root tag. Between beans and beans, you can configure all your bean classes. Bean ID, bean ID, controller. For controller, I am naming C. Any ID you can put. And class, configure fully qualified path here. Okay. So your class, controller class is there in com.ds.web. So give com.ds.web.student controller. Fully qualified path we need to configure here. And your bean tag you can end with self-ending, or if you have any sub tags, right? If you have any child tags, you can close with this bean tag. So here we have multiple child tags also. When you have child tags, we put beans, and beans between we add child tags, or else you can do self-ending. Then controller, business, business class ID B, student business. It is there in BO package, and DAO is under DAO package.
Sir, we can use whether we can use bean ID, C, B, D, depend on our choose, na?
Naming convention considered. You have just a second. Consider your application is having 1,000 plus classes. Okay.
Okay.
So in that case, you need to follow a little bit naming conventions, right? You need
Yes,
to
got
follow
it.
naming conventions for your IDs. But if you go to
Okay,
advanced
got it.
concepts, what we realize is ID is also not required. For time being, let's use it. Okay. So in advanced,
Okay, sir.
right, while going advanced concepts, we really don't care IDs also. For time being, I'm using them. Okay. ID should be unique. You should not repeat again ID. So as I have a utility class here, utility student. Okay. Connection pool utility I have here. And something again I should not put C, as it is connection pool. If I put C here, then container will throw an error that saying you have ID, duplicate ID with C. Okay. So you should not repeat same ID. So put CP connection pool. Now I configured all my POSO classes here using bean tag. Configure all your POSO classes using bean tags here. If you have 1,000 POSO classes, 1,000 bean tags. That's it. You need to configure all your beans first here. Now you can load this XML into container. For that one, you no need to go here and export it as a WAR file or jar file. Again, containers, as I said, simple Java class. So you need to write container class like this. Create some package pom.ds.app. An embedded IOC container we have. Embedded means along with jar it came. Okay. Put any name for your container startup class. This is the container startup class. Okay. A simple main method. You can have a simple main method class, and here you can load your XML into your container. Okay. Use bean factory or application context. Okay. So first thing what you should do is we created a project and we created bean classes, but we forget to add jar files, right? Go to build path, configure build path, add Spring jar files. If it is a Maven project, you need to add these dependencies through Maven. Otherwise, you can download Spring jars and you can add it here. All Spring jars I added, really not required, but as we are going to discuss all the modules, I'll add all the jar files. Okay. So I added Spring given jar files into my project, and yeah. So here I'm loading my XML file. So first reading XML file, from this location under resources. My XML file name is student-app.xml. Okay, this is my XML file. First, to read this XML file, like file reading, right? So to read your XML file, we have one resource class. Using this resource class, you can read your resources from class path. Instead of giving fully qualified path, you can give class path. So your XML is reading here. Once after reading, load this into container. So as I said, there are two containers, bean factory and application context. As I said, there are two containers. Right? With Spring Core jar, we have bean factory, and Spring context, we have application context. Okay. So this is the advanced container that we use in multiple places instead of this bean factory. Okay. So first, let's see with bean factory. I'm loading my XML here through bean factory and run it. As I said, bean factory is responsible for creating all your objects, right? And we missed one thing here. XML file should have or should contain DTD doc type definition or XML schema. Whether through schema or DTD, you should configure your XML. Otherwise, your XML will not be validated. So you need to configure the DTD first or XSD first. Okay. So this is how we will have DTD. Configure this DTD into XML first. Okay. So all right, we have beans here, and we are loading that beans into our factory. Now when I call this, it need to call all the constructors and it should create objects. See the output. Wow, is it created all the objects? Can we say yes? My IOC container started and it is not created, right? If it is created, the default constructors should have called and I should have seen this output. Constructors not called. This connection also not created. DO object also not created. Business, no object created. Even single object not created by bean factory. See, nothing created. So that's why we say this bean factory as a lazy container. So it is a lazy container. It won't create any object. That's why we go with advanced containers. Okay, still you can ask this lazy container to create objects. How to ask? You need to call factory dot get bean by giving your bean ID here, right? You can give your bean ID and you can ask for object. As your application need all the objects, your application must require all these objects. That's the reason we implemented all these classes, controller, business, and DAO. But whatever bean you call, only that bean only it will create. So I have controller here, right? Controller ID is C, business ID is B, DAO ID is D, connection pool is CP. So let me call one bean C. I'm asking my container, can you create controller object? Yes. As you requested, I'll create a controller object, only controller. That's it. It is not creating another objects. As a complete use case to execute, I need all these objects, but only controller object it is creating. So as it is lazy, you need to call each and every bean. You need to call each and every bean until unless you request for your bean, it won't create. BDCP. Give your IDs here, business class, DO class, connection pool class. Now it created all your bean classes. Student bean created, student controller bean, student business, DAO, and connection pool. All your objects created. When you go with this lazy container, bean factory, it will create instances whenever you call. Until unless you call, it won't create any object. And is it the same if I call Again and again, I'll call the same set for 3 times or 4 times. How many objects now it should create? Earlier when I call this set, it created these 4 objects. Again, if I call the same set, or again and again if I call my bean classes, only one set of objects created, not many. Though you called 4 times, it created only 4 objects instead of 16 objects. Is it because of its laziness? No. Basically, Spring will maintain your classes as a singleton objects. Okay. Either you go with the bean factory or advanced container, your bean classes are singletons. It really not required to create a new object for every user request. Okay. So it is not really required to create a new object for every user request. Consider the student registration. Here I have a view. Okay. Multiple students are going to register as schools open. Let's say if it is school application. So they open school registration. Many students are trying to registering from here. Considered 2000 students applied for it. So 2000 students requested from here. They opened this view and they are registering from there. Though it is 2000 students are requesting from the views, backend side your controller object is only one. Your business object is also only one. And your DO also only one object. Only one object should be enough to handle any number of requests. Okay, remember that only one single object is required. Prototype object really not required. Okay, so singleton objects means single objects would be enough. Okay, single objects would be enough. So that's the reason your container creating only one object per application. It will not create multiple objects. Though you have multiple users request also, one object would be enough. Okay, yeah. So singleton object it will maintain. If you want to make it prototype, I don't want singleton. For every request I want to create a brand new object. For every request I want to create a brand new object. If that is the case, here we have scope property, scope prototype we should configure. By default the scope is singleton, means one object. One object, though if you request for 100 times, 1000 times or million times. But if you change that from singleton to prototype, now see I'm calling the set for 4 times. Earlier the object created only once, though I call for 4 times also. So I called 16 objects, but here I have only 4 objects. But now as I changed it to prototype, 16 objects created. The same set created 4 times. If we have 1000 classes and if users are 1000 into 1000, what is the count? 1 lakh, 10 lakh objects it will create. If count is 10,000, your classes and request also 1,000, 10,000 into 1000, like 10 lakhs objects will be created. Is that many objects your servers can manage? If that many users request at a time and if you try to create that many objects in your RAM, your server might crash. Okay, so your server might crash because of multiple requests. Your server RAM may not hold this many objects. End of the day, your JVM objects are going to create in a RAM, right? That particular server machine RAM. If RAM is in size, if it is a 4 GB or something 8 GB RAM that is dedicated, that may not enough for your objects. And is there any problem if I configure it as a singleton? No problem. You can use it as a singleton. You can use it as a singleton. You can put scope singleton. Default scope also singleton. You need not to put this. When you want a singleton, remove the scope. So just remove the scope from here. The default scope is singleton only. So when it is singleton, it creates only one object per application. It will not create multiple series. So now the request is 10,000 request or million request. For your 1000 classes, only 1000 objects. It may utilize like 5 MB or 10 MB based on your object size from your RAM. The remaining space it will utilize for processing, so that your application also will execute faster. Okay. So always it is recommended to singleton. So for singleton, you specially need not to add any scope here. Okay. If you want to until unless make it prototype. So this is how you can deal with your IOC container. This is the container. This is the container class given in Spring 4. If you want to use advanced container, you can use. Let me write one more application for advanced container. Advanced container is application using advanced IOC. One more application class I'll write here. So here, load your XML directly into advanced container class. Application context factory equal to new class path XML application context. XML application context. Here you configure your XML. That's it. And do you need to call to create objects? Do you need to call your factory dot getBean method when it is application context? It is really not required until unless you need some methods of this class to create objects. You really need not to wake up your container. So whenever you start your container, this container is eager loading container. It will create objects at the time of the container startup itself. We have observed here for bean factory the same thing. Until unless I call get bean method, bean factory didn't created any object. It did not created any object until unless I call bean factory. But here you need not to call factory.getBean method. You can directly load XML. It will create all the objects. That means your infrastructure or your application objects will be ready for use when you use application context. But when you use bean factory, your objects will not be ready until unless user request. So when you go with bean factory, what will happen when first user request? That first user need to wait for all the objects creation. From the next user request onwards, it will not take any time, but for first user request, it will take time to create objects. Until unless first user request, it will not create any object in your RAM. Whereas in advanced container will prepare all your objects and it will wait for user's request. This is the eager loading container, whereas bean factory is lazy container. Okay, so we use this container only. Okay, we can call it as J2EE container also. Okay, you can call it as advanced container or J2EE container. You can call this one as a core container. You can call it as core container. Okay, so this is how your containers are capable. Self containers are capable to manage all your MVC classes. So from here, your view need to change. Your thought process need to change. Okay, so earlier what you understand that is when you implement your application using servlets or struts or JSF, any other frameworks, you thought that you need to convert it into a var file and you should deploy it into Tomcat. Tomcat is going to manage all your classes, but here no other container will manage your classes. Only your self containers will manage your classes. Your self containers will manage your classes. Okay, so the self containers are your bean factory or application context. These classes are responsible to manage all your classes. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Actually, go to the configuration file while jar file.
You need jar file.
How to configure jar file? Go to
Ah,
path configuration file.
okay. So to configure jar files, right? First you need to download the jars. I'll share you jar files, okay? Spring jars I'll send, Spring 2
Okay.
version, 3 version. There are multiple versions. Or else from Google also you can download. You can ask like all
Okay.
Spring
Okay. Got
jar
it.
files you can download. But right when we go with advanced Maven concepts, the jar files adding through build path also not required. Okay, for time being until learning this Spring framework modules, right? Just do this practice. Okay, so go to build path. In build path, right? You know how to add jars. Select the class path under libraries, add external jars, and wherever you have your jar files, right? Add that jar files. I have many jar files, right? For my
Means
practice.
we need to download all jar file, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Download all the jar files. But for practicing this IOC, right? We really not required all these jar files apart from this context jar file and Spring Core jar file, and there is a commons library. Only that 3 jar files would be enough. But I would suggest download all these jar files. I'll share through email, okay? I'll share through Drive. Download these jar files and use these jar files until we finish with MVC. Okay, that will
Okay.
get added. So add your jar files into your project and you can utilize them.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah, that's it. So we will go one by one to the advanced concepts, okay? Just to make you understand that we use IOS containers to manage your classes, okay? So then we will go to in deep or in depth into core module. What are all the features that we have, okay? And how we can use them between our classes. That all we will learn, okay? From next session. So if you are new to this session, right? Share your email ID so that I'll share. Once you confirm, right, I'll share all the material and the class notes, everything. Please share your email IDs through chat. And before finishing these demos, right, please confirm with them. They will send you a paid link. There we will, have our regular session.
So it is 1 hour daily.
I
Hello.
didn't get you. Yes. What is your
So is
question?
it 1 hour daily duration?
We will have 1 hour to 1.5 hour based on the
Okay, sir.
topic. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so after demo class, you will start again from the beginning, or you will continue with this only? Means when we confirm, sir, so you will again start from the basic of
Yeah.
Spring.
So maybe demos will be finished by tomorrow or day after, right? So once done with that, we will start actual sessions, more concrete sessions from the beginning.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So I got 2, 3. 3 are new today. Okay. Okay. I'll copy. I'll copy all these. Yeah. If you already shared, no issue. I have your mail IDs. And please be confirm. Okay. Get the paid link so that we can start soon our regular sessions.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. And as I said right yesterday, I'll share my class notes and the video links. They'll share a regular video recording also. Every session will be recorded. If you miss in the session or somehow if you fell sick, so particular day, you will get the video recordings of that day and you can go through it. And I'll send all the examples. By following the video, you can download the example and you can run. And you can reach out to me if you want to understand more. I can share you my details as well. Okay. So we want to make all
Yes,
of
sir.
you 100% get the same equal knowledge. Okay. Yeah. So then that's all for today. So we'll
Sir,
yeah.
can you share, send the Google Pay number or Phone Pay number, Durga Shop, then we can pay our fee.
In this chat they didn't share, but if you see email, right? Durgasoft email. Did you receive any emails from Durgasoft?
Yes. Then don't worry, I will pay.
If you see here, right, in the demo link page itself, they have shared here. They have shared all the contact details, bank details also, and Google Pay also. They have given.
Okay.
This is Google Pay.
Oh.
If you have any doubts, right, just reach out to them. They will quickly help you.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello,
Once done with your payment, send the screenshots to this email IDs. Okay. And if you have any
Okay.
problem, also reach out to me. Okay. This is my personal number. 918-62482. You can have this. Okay. If you have any problem with reaching out them, you can even call me or message me on this number. Yeah. Somebody speaking. Hello.
Sir, one session done now, please send the video on Google Drive, then we can download easily.
Yeah, for demo sessions, right? Directly demo session videos will go to the YouTube.
Yes, let's start.
See this
Once
link, right?
start.
They shared this demo videos link, right? If you click on that, you can see our videos. First two session videos we have here. 27th video, 28th discussion video, and today our video also will be uploaded here. This is the link. In your mail
Okay.
itself, you have link. Our session videos only will be loaded here. All the demo videos will be loaded here. Only demo videos will be available here in YouTube. Thereafter, right, they will share to personal drive. Only your email ID would be able to access
Okay.
it. Okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything apart from it? If not, we'll wrap up the session. Okay?
Okay. Bye,
Okay,
sir.
guys. Yeah. Bye. Good day.